Hello, my name's Sube Banerjee. I am the Professor of Dementia and the Associate Dean of Brighton and Sussex Medical School in England. The biggest challenges that we faced in trying to put together a national dementia strategy for England were very much based around making the case for there being a strategy at all. So in the context of health policy focusing more on localism, there's been a move away from grand national policies. There's been a move away from the centre essentially telling or being seen to tell the periphery what to do, and that move towards there being more local responsibility and more responsibility from local clinicians is an extremely good one. However, that did making the case for a national strategy for dementia a difficult task, and it was one that required the development of a unanimity of approach from a number of different areas. So we were very lucky that the Alzheimer's Society in the UK was an extraordinarily strong proponent of this, as you'd expect it to be, and enabled us to have right from the very start a very clear articulation of the needs that were identified by people with dementia and their carers. And it was very clear that the system wasn't working well for those individuals. It was also helpful to generate a range of supports. So there were professional supports from within old age psychiatry and geriatrics and neurology, but also vitally on the political side, we were able to obtain an analysis of the systems for dementia in the UK from the National Audit Office, which is essentially the body that works out whether government is spending its money well. And bringing those things together, we were able to make the case that dementia was very common, with 700,000 people with dementia at that time in the UK, that it was very expensive, it costing £18 billion per year, and that the money that was being spent wasn't being spent very well. And with those building bricks, and with the consensus across professions and across the user and carer groups, we were able then to go forward to a phase where we were able to ask, if we're going to have a strategy, what should be in that strategy. I think one of the interesting things, if you look worldwide at the national strategies that have been generated, is that they do share three key elements, and those are the same key elements that we identified in the National Dementia Strategy for England. So three elements, the first being the need to improve public and professional attitudes and understanding, the second being early diagnosis and intervention for all, and the third being improved quality of care from diagnosis right through to the end of life. And one of the challenges in dementia is that these are not simple things, they're complicated. Each one of them is made up of several steps. And so part of what a strategy can do is start to chunk up the challenges and enable you to work out what it is you need to do first, and what are the priorities and what essentially will yield you most value in the first instance. I think that there is tremendous value that accrues from having a national strategy for a subject such as Alzheimer's disease, such as dementia, which is so broad, which transcends the boundaries of health and social care, transcends the boundaries of what the state does and what private services do and what families do. It transcends so many boundaries that actually it does need a national strategy to start bringing those elements together. So I think that the things that one starts with are that consensus that I talked about earlier. It's tremendously important to get a clear idea of the 2 or 3 things that are most important to people, and structuring that around the things that directly come out of the Spanish situation would be the important thing to do. So it really is locally owned. So local figures on the costs at the moment, local figures on the numbers and how those are going to grow, how those are going to develop, local ideas about where the spend is at the moment and where the problems are in the system. And you'll get that from the profession, and you'll get that from people with dementia and carers. And then there's a need to acknowledge that even in times of financial straits, that it is possible to do things. And one needs to think big enough. For a problem as big as dementia, you need to think quite big in terms of the solutions. Because we know that if we stand still and do nothing, the immense costs that dementia causes to healthcare systems, particularly at the end of life in dementia, these will increase predictably in the next 20 years. They will triple in the next 20 years without us doing things. So we need to work now in order to ensure that the budgets that we have are able to deal with the needs that emerge in the next 20 years. Yes, I do think dementia is starting to get the attention that it deserves. 10, 15 years ago, it was the case that really very few people spoke of dementia, and perhaps that was understandable because there were other policy areas that needed to be dealt with. We needed to have better services for cancer, for heart disease, for strokes, for children's services, and it's perfectly understandable that those should come first, partly because they're more simple than the approaches that we'll need for dementia. There were particular drugs that one might use, particular operations that one might use that would actually help the whole social care impact, health and social care impact of those illnesses. But dementia is more complicated. I think there's no doubt that dementia is so much more of a priority than it was. People really are starting to understand that dementia isn't just that state of total dependency at the end of dementia when you're unable to care for yourself, unable to talk, unable to walk, that actually there are 7 to 12 years with dementia before that stage where there are impairments, there are problems, but people can live well with dementia, in that it's extraordinarily brave that people have come forward and said that they or their families are affected by dementia, and that starts to change public opinion. It starts to change professional attitudes and understandings, and therefore help seeking and help offering. The priority that dementia has now, with the World Health Organization becoming interested, with the development of national strategies, with the G8 considering dementia as part of its agenda at the meeting in December. We couldn't have dreamt of having that sort of priority even 5 years ago. So no, we're going fast in dementia. The priority is rising, and it's because the logic for doing something active is inescapable. If we ignore dementia, as we had been ignoring it in the past, it will only cause more problems. So it's brilliant that there are politicians and there are structures worldwide now that are starting to wake up to the priority that dementia needs to have. It's our next great challenge. What's very clear in dementia is that the things that drive good quality of life, that drive the ability for people to live well with their dementia, are very largely in the realm of non-pharmacological interventions rather than pharmacological interventions. That's not to say drugs aren't useful and helpful, and it's not to say that we need to be sure that people only get those drugs that are useful to them. That's obviously important. However, the educational approaches that we can do, giving people information on dementia so that they can live their lives well and so that carers can modify their behaviour to enable people to live well, that's tremendously important. Psychological approaches that avoid the use of drugs, that enable people to deal with depression and behavioural problems in dementia like agitation and aggression, again, tremendously important. And so many social issues exist in dementia that you can't approach dementia without thinking about housing, without thinking about the ways that our communities conceptualise dementia and the ways that we welcome or do not welcome people with dementia. So it's that psychological, social and educational set of interventions that really are the powerful things to enable people to live well with dementia. Now, what they don't do is make dementia go away. But then dementia is just like many of the chronic diseases that we have. It's a great exemplar for the diseases of the 21st century rather than of the 20th century. there's no doubt that dementia affects really everything that people with dementia do, and it affects every element of society because of that. So there is a need for our communities to become friendly to dementia. We wouldn't dream of discriminating against people on the basis of them having heart disease, and we shouldn't on the basis of them having dementia. But people need to know what to do. That's why the Dementia Friends program in Japan has been so amazing. They developed a program. There was a problem with dementia. Japan has more people with dementia than any other country per head because of its older population. But there were problems with dementia because people found it difficult to talk about dementia. They actually changed the name for dementia, and within, I think, 3 years, they've recruited just about 4 million people to be dementia friends. So they have they get a short course that actually orientates them to what dementia is and what they might be able to do. And that's changing the way society looks at dementia in Japan. We can create dementia-friendly communities in Europe, in the UK, I'm sure you can in Spain as well. But people need to know what to do. So there's that public education, that public awareness that one needs to do. People fear dementia. There are stigmas that are associated with dementia. People fear talking about it, and people fear raising it as a possibility, even in healthcare interactions. We need to deal with that because it is so much better to know than it is not to know. And it is so much better to know early than it is to know late. And the minute we set up systems that enable people to know what's going on, then we can actually have people who are able to make their own choices, and we can generate a whole agenda that's about preventing harms in dementia. I'm immensely optimistic about improvements in dementia care. We've done an immense amount just in the last 5 years, and I think the next 10, 15 years are going to be the best time ever for developing responses to dementia. And I think that will be in terms of the services that we develop, the changes that we make in society, the development of dementia-friendly services and of communities. That will be about people recognising their role in helping people with dementia, and that becoming part of everyone's business rather than it being just the province of specialists. I think that there will be advances on the biomedical side. I think that we will have better treatments that may start to modify the process in certain subtypes of dementia and Alzheimer's disease and in others. And there will also be a greater understanding of how we might prevent dementia from happening also. So these are exciting times. The future is rosy for dementia. There are reasons to be cheerful.